It's a dangerous trend across the country, chaos on college campuses. When libertarians or conservatives are invited to speak, some students at, for example, Notre Dame University voicing their opinions about a recent speaker. He's controversial to some. He's author Charles Murray.
Yeah, I do think he's promoting a racist agenda. One of the definitions of racism is believing that you're superior, that your race is superior to another.
People on the left, such as those who have gathered here, will take out little snippets of those quotes, little pieces of analysis, and they'll present it as if he's like, some white supremacist or Nazi.
Well, joining us with his reaction is a professor in his own right at the University of Pennsylvania, Fox News contributor, Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel. Dr. Emanuel, I can't wait to get your perception of how you think these kids are reacting, these students are reacting to these speakers, in many cases conservatives, sometimes libertarians.
Well, first of all, I think we need to be clear. There is freedom of speech in this country that includes the right of people to speak and the right of people to protest against speakers. So I think there is a right on both sides. We've often had very vigorous discussions in this country. I can say that my experience at the University of Pennsylvania is people get to speak, students listen, sometimes students protest, and I've been protested at various universities, and that's part of the discussion. I mean, it's part of the large discussion and disagreements and attempt to resolve it. What I think is important is to have some civility in these discussions and to begin listening to each other. I would remind your audience, though, that the long history of America and the long history of trying to suppress speech has mostly been the right suppressing the left. I'll go back to, John Quincy Adams and the gag rule and the slave states trying to shut him up. We had Joe McCarthy and trying to make every liberal a communist. We had the bad history that included Senator McConnell trying to shut up Senator Warren. I mean, these are mostly the suppression of speech is mostly the right suppressing the left, picking out a few libertarian people who are suppressed. I think it's awful when people are suppressed. I think it's much better to have a dialogue. One of the reasons I'm here on Fox is I believe we need a dialogue. Liberals and conservatives should not just go to their corner and talk to themselves.
Right. And you also know that
I'm a big believer in talking.
Dr. Emanuel, you also know that our audience is not made up of all conservatives or liberals. You know that it's made up of much more than that.
That's one of the reasons I'm here.
Yep. And so, Dr. Emanuel, I'll give you the big picture. We don't have any video of John Quincy Adams, but in the recent history, we do know this. When a controversial speaker shows up at campus, I think that's part of the campus experience. Get all views, create a discussion. Why is it suddenly okay to act like this and shout them down? I'm wondering if it's incumbent on the leadership of these universities to make sure that there's some civility there.
So, first of all, I think it is incumbent to have a lot of different views on campus and for people to be exposed and have their own views challenged. That's part of being educated, is to understand your views and to understand the other side. But we should also be very clear. The right to protest, the right to express your views and to disagree with someone is deep-seated in America, and we want that right of protest. And I don't think we want to say when students protest and students object, there's a problem. That's part of what they're learning.
I agree with you. I don't mind this. If you see the video there, if you have a monitor, if you're going to protest outside,
Unfortunately, I don't have a monitor.
If you're going to sit out there and have a sign, that's fine. But if you're going to go inside and listen, and put your hand up and ask a question, that's just basic manners. What happened at Berkeley, I think, is just out of control. I don't care who the speaker is, way left or way right. It's just part of the process. You read about people like Stalin and Hitler, not because you like them, but because they're significant people in history. And I think somehow this message has been skewed that if I listen and they're booked to speak, that they need to be confronted or shouted down. I don't know how this got how this philosophy got turned on its head like this.
Well, look, I agree with you. I think that except for the very, very extremes, Ahmadinejad or, you mentioned Hitler, I do think, though, there is a reason not to have them on campuses. On the other hand, I do think that we should, and I agree with you here, we want civility, we want to listen, and we want the opportunity to challenge. I do think protests outside, protests that are vocal outside of a venue, perfectly fine. I also agree with you that violence is not acceptable in these circumstances, and I don't think that's acceptable. You ask me where this comes from. When Senator McConnell says to Elizabeth Warren, you can't read that letter, that's not a good sign. That's not a good symbol. When President Obama addresses a joint session of Congress and a Republican representative from South Carolina yells out unprecedentedly, "You lied," in the middle of his speech, you know, there is something, and that does set a tone. It sets a tone for the left. It sets a tone for the right. Let's get back to beginning to listen to each other and sit down and talking to each other.
Absolutely.
I am for that. And by the way, I'll say in my class, you know, I worked on the Affordable Care Act. I teach a class on health care. And one of the things we do is we invite someone who's more conservative on the health policy spectrum. I've had Joe Antos from the American Enterprise Institute. I've had Doug Holtz-Eakin, who's another conservative, served under President Bush, come into my class and talk to my students. And my students challenge them and ask questions. And that's the way education should be.
And I remember Alan
challenging
Dershowitz, absolutely.
And protest. By the way, protest is part of education. You learn what you stand for. You try to articulate your views. So, you know,
just
I'm
don't throw
for
bike
vigorous
racks.
discussion. I'm not for violence.
Gotcha.
And I think that is a very clear line.
Yeah, don't throw bike racks at people. We agree on that. And when Alan Dershowitz can praise Ted Cruz as a student and say, I really enjoyed having him in my class, knowing their opposite points of view, that's more the approach we're used to. Dr. Emanuel, thanks so much.
Thank you.